Hey folks, Mr. Hayhurst here, and welcome to our first video on reading behaviors. And this particular video is going to be the first one in the series for monitoring your comprehension. It's also going to serve as an overview video to introduce you to reading behaviors in general, and it's also going to talk about a few things that we'll do for the rest of the year with regard to the use of reading behaviors. So let's go ahead and get started here. First off, let me just make sure you guys understand that there is a code for these videos. If you look at the lower right hand part of the screen here, it says RB001. And what that basically means is that it's the code RB stands for reading behaviors, and that 001 means that this is the first video in the series for reading behaviors. And as they go, the numbers will change, so you'll always see a code somewhere to let you know what lesson this applies to. And eventually on the website there will be a master list of all of the video codes, so that way it'll make it easier for you to navigate through the videos. So let's go ahead and keep going here. So to start with this idea of reading behaviors, I want to take you back to when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I really idolized Bruce Lee. And as a majority of you guys know, I started martial arts training when I was 10 years old, and I've trained in martial arts my whole life since I was 10. And one of the things with Bruce Lee was that he just amazed me with everything that he could do on screen. He was like Superman to me. And you know, Bruce Lee made several films, and he was really famous in the 1970s, and he died when he was quite young. He died in his early 30s, and it was a real shattering moment in the martial arts community when he died, because he basically brought Kung Fu and Chinese martial arts to the world. And for many of us, later on in our lives, we discovered that Bruce Lee was also a very avid reader and philosopher. And for me, that happened when I came across this book here. And the book is called Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Tao in Chinese means way, and or path. And Jeet Kune Do was the martial art that Bruce Lee himself invented, and it means the art of the intercepting fist. And basically what Bruce did is he combined all the stuff that he knew from Chinese Kung Fu, and he mixed it with other martial arts from the West and around the world. He combined Western fencing, boxing. He took elements of Japanese judo and karate, and mixed it all together to form his own method. And so once I came across this book, I realized at how fantastic of a writer Bruce was, and he was very eloquent, and he had really beautiful handwriting actually. And it was just awesome to know that a martial artist was also such a very deep thinker. And Bruce read a lot. As you can see there in that photo, he had a lot of books. In fact, he had over 3,000 books in his personal library. And he took lots of notes, as you can see there on the screen. Those are just a few of the notes that he took. And he would do things like write down ideas. He would draw symbols and shapes. He would draw out little cartoon figures depicting the moves that he was thinking about. And it didn't matter where he was. He could be on an airplane and he would write his notes down on a napkin. If he was in a restaurant and all they had was matchbooks right there at the table, he would take a matchbook and write down whatever he could on the matchbook just so he could write his thoughts down. He had hundreds of notebooks where he jotted down all of his notes. And what I want you guys to go ahead and do here in a moment is I want you to take a look at this video that has his daughter Shannon Lee showing you his personal library. And more importantly, I want you to take a look at what he did in his books. So let's go ahead and check that out now.
We are in right now the archives, where the book collection is kept. My father read books on all different subjects. So these are categorized by exercise, training, and fighting methods books, all in these two cabinets. And if you note, you might notice that the books are all double deep on these shelves. So there are two layers of books, one stacked behind the other, on all of the shelves in here. There's literally thousands and thousands of books. He has books on religion and philosophy. He has books on acting and filmmaking. He has books on poetry, self-help. Let me just take a stroll over here. History, geography, novels, Chinese art. What else have we got? Sales. And we also have a whole collection of Chinese language books as well. This book is The Art of the Foil by Luigi Barbasetti. My father was very into fencing. He has many books in his collection on fencing. And this one has one of his business cards in the front of it. Some of the books have a business card, some of them have his signature, and some of them have nothing. My father underlined in this book in blue and in red. I'm not sure the difference. I think the red stuff is probably the stuff he really wanted to highlight. And then as you can see in his beautiful handwriting that he had, he made notes all around here. There's notes here. He's written 70% and 30% in terms of the weight, the dispersion of weight here in the stance. He's written, here it says, naturalness means easily and comfortably. You know, so he had beautiful handwriting, number one, which is very easy to read, for which I'm grateful. And many of his books have this type of, you know, annotation in them.
So, honestly, how cool is that? Basically, the video showed us that Bruce actively read. Anything that he read, he jotted down notes, he put his own thoughts, and he honestly looked at the text and he made it his own by reading it the way he did. And so what you really need to understand is that what he did is he took his thoughts, which are invisible, and he made them what? Visible. And this is one of the most important aspects to understanding what good readers do and how they take note of what they're thinking. So, for me personally, Bruce Lee and his writing taught me that the very act of reading and writing is cool because he taught himself so much with all the different books that he had. He had thousands of books ranging from all kinds of different topics. And then after that, he took that knowledge from all of the books that he read and he created his own original writing from it. And for me, that was a total turning point in my understanding of what good readers do and what good writers do. And it created some behaviors that I have kept till this very day. So if you take a look at the screen here, it even says I still have my very first notebook from when I was 10 years old. And what I did is I kind of created my own notebook system. And what happened was, if you take a look at the screen, I have different notebook colors. And I have dozens of notebooks that I've filled up over the years, and each color represents a different subject that I study very deeply. So the red notebooks in my library are all the notes that I've ever taken based off of martial arts and different ideas that I have about martial arts and the different things that I've learned along the way from studying multiple martial arts over my training career. And then the black notebook is one that I use to write down thoughts about philosophy and spirituality and religion, things like that. So that's where I really check in with that part of my life, and that's where I jot down my ideas for that. The blue notebook is what I use for songwriting because the way I look at it is it has a blue color and it reminds me of blues because blues is one of my favorite music genres. And so whenever I do any songwriting and I try to come up with lyrics and things like that, or just general theoretical ideas about the music, I put it in that blue notebook. And the green one, for me, green is money. So things dealing with finance and savings and stuff like that, I put in the green notebook. And then finally, my yellow notebook, the yellow for me symbolizes light, like enlightenment. And that is the notebook color that I use for all my teaching stuff. And whenever I have ideas about teaching, or like lesson plan ideas, or I come across really inspiring quotes about education, I put it in that yellow notebook. So as you can see, based off of the behaviors that I witnessed in Bruce Lee, I went ahead and created my own way of taking all the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years in a variety of subjects, and I put them all together in these different notebooks. So basically, that brings us to the question of what are reading behaviors. And it's pretty simple, actually. Reading behaviors are nothing more than the things that good readers do. They're habits. And these habits can help you understand what you're reading. And as you get better at using them, these habits will become second nature to you, and you'll naturally start doing them in your head. Now, earlier in the class, I mentioned this buzzword called metacognition. And what we need to understand about metacognition is that it's basically just thinking about how we think, or thinking about thinking. And metacognition itself forms the foundation for the reading behaviors because it brings awareness to our own thought process, right? And so what it does is, by understanding metacognition, it's going to bring awareness to your own special thought process, your own individualized way of thinking. Now, with the reading behaviors, we have what I call the 6 clusters. And these 6 clusters are the categories for the different reading behaviors that you'll learn. The first one is monitoring comprehension, and that's the one that we're going to begin going to in depth as the video goes on. The second cluster is what we call activate and connect. This is where we try to activate our previous background knowledge of places that we've been and things that we've learned, and we connect what we're currently reading with things that we've learned in the past or experiences that we've had in the past. The third cluster is going a little bit deeper into the idea of asking questions and having very, very specific questions that we ask in order to make sure that we understand things and also go a little bit deeper into the text. The fourth cluster is infer meaning, or what I will just call inferencing, and this is where we take evidence from the text and we go beyond the text, and we actually look at ideas past the text, go into research that could be based off of topics in the text, and so forth. The fifth cluster is what we call determining importance. It's very important to understand what's important in a text, and depending on what your needs are, you can look at the text in a variety of ways, and some things will be more important than others, and so you want to be able to isolate those important things so that way you can do whatever you need to do with that information. And then the last cluster here is called summarize and synthesize. It's where you take all the knowledge that you've learned, you put it into a nice, neat package, and you're able to summarize it in a very brief way. When you can do that, when you're able to take everything that you've learned and put it together and explain it simply with all the important points contained in the summary, then you really understand the material. So each of these clusters builds on each they each build on each other, and what it leads to is just better reading ability. So when we look at cluster 1, monitoring comprehension, we need to understand what that means. And to monitor basically means to just constantly check. You're always going back and thinking about something, analyzing it to check it. And of course, comprehension means to understand. So when you're monitoring your comprehension, what you're basically doing is you're making sure you understand something. And in this case, you're making sure that you understand what you're reading. So good readers pay attention and think about words and ideas in order to understand what they read. They're constantly monitoring and checking to see that they understand things at the word level, the sentence level, the paragraph level, and so forth. It's a constant checking to make sure you understand everything that you've read up until that point. So the first reading behavior that we want to establish to monitor our comprehension is known as following your inner conversation, or sometimes you'll hear me call it follow your inner voice. They're both the same thing. And good readers carry on an inner conversation with the text that they're reading. They're always trying to put themselves in the shoes of the characters, or they're trying to understand the author's thought process in an informational text, and so forth. So we have to understand that we all have a voice that speaks to us as we read, and this voice says different things to us depending on what we're reading. And our thinking changes when we read new information, and it is different when we reread something or when we read something that confuses us. If something's very easy, we're able to get the information very fast. If we find certain parts confusing, we have to reread something, and so we have to kind of monitor how fast we're reading, which words are throwing us off, and so forth. And then, of course, our thinking completely changes when we're utterly confused. And so, as the lessons go on, we'll address each of these issues individually. Now, part of following your inner conversation is a reading behavior that we call leaving tracks. So just like an animal in the wild leaves tracks, we want to leave tracks of our thinking as we read. Leaving tracks is when you actively leave notes or jot down quick reminders to remember your thoughts. Now, notice that I emphasize the word actively. When you're reading, you're honestly monitoring your comprehension, checking to see that you understand. You're leaving record of your thoughts, and you'll have your own individual way of doing that. So it's a very active thing. It's not passive, okay? Leaving tracks is making your invisible thoughts visible. I can't stress this idea enough. It's very important that you understand this. When we pay attention to our inner voice and leave tracks of our thinking, we understand and learn much more from our reading. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at a very short piece of writing in order to illustrate what we're doing by following our inner conversation and leaving tracks. What we're going to take a look at is the very first paragraph of chapter 1 in Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Tale of the Lightning Thief. And The Lightning Thief is a very, very popular book, and of course, a lot of you have probably already seen the movie. So, what that means is you probably have some background experience with this particular story. Now, you might not have read the book, but you have background experience possibly from seeing the movie. So let's see how that could possibly influence the way we interpret what we're reading, and more importantly, how it could influence the way we leave tracks. So this part of chapter 1 is titled "I Accidentally Vaporize My Pre-Algebra Teacher." So I thought that was pretty funny. So I might decide next to that particular part to maybe draw a little smiley face to let me know, hey, I thought that was funny. Somebody could very well think that this word vaporize is confusing and they might not know what it means, so they might draw a question mark above that. Somebody could rightfully take a look at pre-algebra and wonder what pre-algebra actually entails. So there's a variety of things that you can do as you leave tracks, but all of it is individual to your own unique thought process. So let's go ahead and take a look at the text here. It says, "Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood." Oh, wait, I've seen the movie before, and I remember that a half-blood is part human and demigod. And a demigod in Greek mythology is, of course, someone who was half human and half god. So in the books and the movies, they refer to them as half-bloods. So I remember that from the movie, so I went ahead and took note of that. The next part reads, "If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or your dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life." So, yeah, it's like Percy's addressing the reader outright. And in my mind, I thought about this. It would be awesome to be a demigod because you'd have all kinds of special powers. You'd go on adventures, fighting monsters, and so forth. So that could be a thought that I would write down too. Now, these are very simplistic examples of leaving tracks, and there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do to leave tracks. As time goes on, you'll develop your own coding system, and different codes or symbols will mean different thoughts and so forth, like exclamation points and question marks. You might leave a heart next to something that you like instead of a smiley face, or some people leave exclamation points next to things that they think are important or they agree with, or they might find particularly interesting. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you guys can do to leave tracks. But the idea is this: you want to actively leave tracks as you read. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. You can use post-it notes. You can write in your notebook. You could have a digital device handy, and particularly if you're using any kind of ebook reader, whether it's a Barnes and Noble Nook or an Amazon Kindle or even a tablet computer of any sort, and you have some kind of app that allows you to read ebooks, you can actually leave notes, digital notes, in the text. And that's something that I do quite a bit because I have over 9,000 ebooks and I leave notes in them all the time. So I'm constantly leaving tracks. So I encourage you guys to start experimenting with your own individual way of leaving tracks. But from here on out, you'll be expected to leave tracks with every single reading that we do. So this will go ahead and conclude this video on following your inner conversation and leaving tracks. And I hope it helps you, and I'll see you in the next video.